and happy holidays. My reindeer antlers aren't working out so hot, but I'm trying here, folks. Trying. We're on a shoestring budget in this production studio. So I'm gonna have to sit with my chair kind of low here. And welcome. Uh, Happy Christmas Eve for those who celebrate Christmas. Cheers. So I thought I've been wanting to do this for a long time, had a few ideas, and I asked for some other suggestions on Twitter, got a few recommendations, and yeah, thought I'd share a few kind of handy tools and tech stuff that I use to make my life a little easier, and got a few interesting suggestions as well. So let's take a look at those. And I'm gonna have to take this off. This is like super annoying. Hope you like the gag, but okay, much better, much better. So the first is a tool that I came across several years ago because I was constantly typing the same stuff over and over and over. I respond to lots of support cases, lots of support tickets, send the same reply to sales inquiries, start meetings to do either a demo or a support phone call where a screen share, whether that was GoToMeeting or Zoom or Teams or whatever. So I was having to copy and paste all that stuff, and it just got so tiring. I was like, oh my gosh, I've typed this 1,000 times. There's got to be a better way. And there are a dozen plus ways of doing this, but I don't have a keyboard with macros. So, for my situation, I looked for, text macro tools, text expander tools. And I came across this product called Fastkeys several years ago. And it was a little rough at the time when I first encountered it. But with version 4 and version 5, it's become more refined and works quite well for me. And it's relatively inexpensive. I don't know the price, but at the time when I bought it was years ago, it was like four copies for X dollars. It was trivial price, one-time fee. So I use Fastkeys as kind of like a text expander or macro or shortcut key, and I can press a key, and in my case, for what I primarily use it for, it expands text. So if I want to say Dynamics 365 Business Central, I just type comma, BCC, hit space, hit tab, whatever, and it expands that. So if I'm writing a blog post, a tweet, an article, documentation, whatever, and I want to use the formal name of Dynamics 365 Business Central, I don't want to have to type that. So comma, BCC, and boom, it's done. If I want to invite someone to a Zoom meeting, I have 3 Zoom meetings scheduled that are always available. And so when I do a meeting invite or I do an email, hey, hop on my Zoom meeting. So comma Z1, comma Z1F has all the phone numbers and extra stuff. So I have all these variations. And once you use it a few times, it's easy to remember the shortcut or the keyboard, whatever version or feature you're using on this. But it's been awesome. It is based on I guess a Linux tool is my recollection. I think it's called AutoKeys or something like that, and it's like a automation tool. And so the author of Fastkeys took that Linux command line tool, took the Windows version, put a UI wrapper on it to make it actually usable because the command line is super arcane to use. And it's super easy. And he has other things, start menu shortcuts, autocomplete gestures. I don't use those. I don't use any of those or some of those at all. I use the shortcuts a little bit, but I've found that mostly I use the text expander. So highly recommended if you're having to type, so one that I always do is, if you have any questions or need assistance, give me a call at the close of my emails. I'm constantly typing that. So very common. So if you're doing any of that repetitively for sales, prospects, support, just standard replies, huge time saver here. And here's an example of what one might look like. This is my Zoom meeting. And so I type Z1F, it expands the full Zoom meeting invite. And I edit it to clean it up and make it more compact, but makes it super easy to send out an invite. And here's an example of a hashtag. So if I'm on Twitter and I want to do certain hashtags, super annoying to type them in, whether it's mobile or desktop. It's just super tedious how you have to select and type out a hashtag, and then it always has the list drop down, and you either have to click or space to get rid of it. Well, I just do #BC space, boom, MS Dyn 365 BC, and it expands. And I do this with conferences as well. So when I attended Directions EMEA, I just did something like #DE, something like that. And coincidentally, it was in Germany. And so #DE would type out Directions EMEA 2022 with the hashtag in front. So super handy tool. And what is nice about the text expander operation in Fastkeys is I'm able to mimic this on my iPhone and iPad. Unfortunately, I don't know of a way to sync it across iOS devices. I believe that I think Fastkeys might have a way to sync between computers. I'll need to refresh my memory on whether I've set that up. But in iOS, I believe I have to set it up on each device as a keyboard text replacement, which is kind of annoying, but I only use a few of them, so it's not too bad. So here are some that I've used. And so when I'm at a conference, #DE, Directions EMEA 2022. Just makes it easier to tweet or, communicate, or you can do the same thing. I do the same thing with email addresses, hey, contact me at this, or phone numbers. And so you can use text replacement. And I guess on Android, it's equivalent. It's just called a personal dictionary. So same concept. So every platform seems to have it. I don't know if Windows has a native feature. I'm not aware of it. I don't know if Mac OS has something similar. But very cool feature if you aren't using it. Huge time saver if you do a lot of repetitive phrases in your typing. Of course, I beat this one to death. TextSmith Snagit. If you don't use this, I recommend it. I know there are a few alternatives, but if you're a heavy screenshot user and you're doing documentation, you're doing training materials, you're doing support tickets, and you're having to annotate or edit these images, I think Snagit is still by far the most comprehensive full-featured solution. If all you need is an occasional screenshot, yeah, you can use other alternatives. But for a full-featured image editor, screenshot tool, panoramic and vertical scrolling screenshots, videos, if you're doing software support or documentation, I think it is invaluable. I have thousands and thousands of screenshots I take. So I asked on Twitter for any recommendations of cool tech tools and gadgets and stuff that save you time. And Teddy replied with Clipboard Fusion for copy and paste, which this is a big category, I realize. I don't really use them much, but he notes with Clipboard Fusion, Control-C once to copy something, or Control-C twice to copy without HTML tags and white space. I can totally see the value of that. That right there would be awesome if I could remember to do that. And no longer need to do paste as text. Anyone who does technical work development, documentation, pasting stuff into Outlook, into Word, into OneNote, is just such a mess when you're having to pull from websites or something else. So great feature. And Clipboard Fusion, I don't know if they have a paid version, but they have a free version that has most of the features. So I don't know, not too many people, maybe a team or an organization would want to use Clipboard Fusion, but these are just some of the main features. So that's pretty cool. And when I saw Clipboard Fusion, I was like, that sounds an awful lot like another tool that I've used in the past called Display Fusion. And it turns out it is made by the same company. So Display Fusion gives you a lot of functionality and interesting features. Excuse me. Interesting features for multi-monitor management. And so I have 4 monitors at my desk, And one of the things I wanted to do is have a background, a desktop on monitor 1 with certain things that I use all the time. So I had a map of, or a list of some abbreviations that I used all the time. And then on monitor 2, I wanted to have a map of the United States with time zones, because I work with customers all across the US, and typically it's the boundary between Central and Eastern. I'm constantly having to look it up. It's like, wait, is Indiana in Eastern or in Central? And Tennessee is split. So I'm like, okay, which area code are they in? And I was having to look up their area code. And I found this map from Image Ability, a website, and it has zip codes, or excuse me, area codes in Tennessee, so you can see west versus east. And if they're in Nashville and they have that area code, you can quickly see whether they're central or east. So this was an example of what I had on my monitor 2. And I don't think I used monitor 3 or 4 for desktop backgrounds, but just an example of some cool features that Display Fusion has. So if you have multiple monitors and you want to deal with different things on those monitors, check out Display Fusion. I think I paid for it. It wasn't expensive. And related to clipboards, Windows Clipboard History. That is a native Windows feature, sort of. Windows logo key, so the Windows key and V, and you can see your clipboard history. Now, the one part that isn't quite out of the box is sharing clipboard items to another Windows 10 device. And I tried this and it didn't work for me. And I think it is because you must be logged in to your Microsoft account and have that as your main login across all of the machines you want to sync. Now, I am not a fan of authenticating my PC or my laptop against my Microsoft account. I have several concerns, so I choose not to do it. It really screws up all sorts of things for me. So in my case, I was unable to use this. It wouldn't work because I didn't have all my machines tied into the Borg of Microsoft authentication. So that is an option if you're into that sort of thing. Now, for more tips and tricks like this, follow Jen Gentleman on Twitter. Holy cow. I don't know how she finds all this stuff, catalogs it all. It's like her full-time job. It might literally be, because she says she works on the engineering team, but she provides help with feedback on start menu settings, taskbar, input, and more. And she has hundreds of these things, and you're just like, what? I didn't know that. And so one that she just recently did was that Windows has a graphing calculator. I had no idea. And she also pointed me to the international clock feature on Windows. So, you know, in the system tray, you have the clock and calendar in Windows 10 in the bottom right. And so what she shared is that if you open the Windows Clock app, you can add cities in here and they will show up on a map and you have a list of more than one time zone. Whereas if you're just using the Windows system tray, if you click on that, I believe you can have just 2 international time zones defined. So that was awesome feedback that she shared on Twitter that I now use all the time, that international clock in Windows. And next up, Dan, I believe, he recommended Devtoys and Microsoft PowerToys. And I've heard of PowerToys. I think I looked at it years ago. I haven't really used it. Devtoys, I have not heard of, but he says fancy zones, image size changer, power rename, and then Devtoys base 64 converter and JSON formatter. And then Nicholas shares that Devtoys has a JWT decoder, which if you're familiar with web APIs and Java Web Tokens and OAuth, then it makes total sense why you'd want to, if you're troubleshooting JWT tokens, that could be handy. And Soren recommended Microsoft Viva Insights. And this was a different one because I I had heard of the name Viva, and I'd heard of it during its pre-release and beta and public preview, but I never bothered to look into what it did or what it was. And so he shared that. And if you look on the Microsoft website, Viva Insights is just kind of this nebulous webpage, and it's not clear what it is. It's like the screenshots they share, it's like it'll remind you every hour to meditate or breathe or, close your eyes, and like kind of vague, smushy, weird, like Zen temple mood type of thing. But apparently it has actual real productivity offerings. So Soren says it acts like a personal assistant. And if you write, I'll make sure to, or something like that, it's a prompt in an email, it will find that, scan that, use ML to remind you about a task, for instance. So it apparently kind of monitors you, which good or bad, right? And scans what you're doing and tries to offer suggestions, presumably based off of Azure ML. As far as I could tell, it is a paid service. It might be included in some other one of the bazillion Microsoft Office 365 umbrella Dynamics product lines, but I didn't see it. It just, on the website, it said it's like $4 a month or something like that. So I don't know that I have the time or initiative to give it a try, but something to think about. A product that I've been using for a while is called Stardock Fences. And the reason I started using it is because, as you can see, I had a bunch of virtual machines. And so when I used maybe a dozen virtual machines I would use, and I had an icon for each virtual machine. I tried the other virtual machine connection managers. I wasn't a fan for very specific reasons. So I just like the Microsoft RDP client, MSTSC, and I would save a shortcut for each VM with connection information, everything right on my desktop. So it would be positioned in the monitor I want, sized the way I want, with the login and credentials I wanted, the IP address of my VM. And I'd have a shortcut for every one. Well, pretty soon they start to pile up and they get messy. So I came across this years ago, and Fences lets you create a little box on any of your desktops, and all sorts of features around this. I only use a very little bit of it, but it lets you organize icon groups. And so I put all my RDP icons in there. And these are my vMix icons. So when I live stream, I use vMix, and I have a couple of profiles I can use. So rather than having to go look for those shortcuts, I just drop shortcuts on my desktop, and there they go. I just double click on an icon on my desktop. I know it's the vMix box, the fence. And you can expand and collapse these. You can make them transparent. You can change colors. So you do all sorts of things to clean up icons on your desktop. So if you have a lot of icons, very handy tool. So that's a cool thing. Not essential, but kind of a neat tech thing if you like clean desktops. Oh, this one I love. You may have noticed over the last couple of years, Twitter UI has become noisier, more intrusive, just shoving stuff in your face. What's happening, latest news, trends, all this. For me, it's garbage that I don't care about. I want to get rid of. And so I just grabbed the recent desktop browser version of Twitter. I don't want to see that entire right column. I want clean, I don't want ads, I don't want obtrusive stuff. So if you install the minimal Twitter browser extension, this is what I see. Super clean. You can even choose which options to show or hide. So it's highly configurable. They've enhanced this rapidly to just have a few options, and now they have several pages of options that you scroll through. So you can say, okay, how wide do I want it? What do I want, borders or not? Do I want to show or remove each feature? Which buttons do I want on the left side? And you can control all of this. A very, very powerful plugin extension. So I use that on all of my my Windows computers for the browser, desktop browser. So highly recommended. Gets rid of all the garbage and the noise. It does not get rid of ads. Those still stream in, but at least it cleans up the visual experience so it's not a visual assault with stuff that I don't care about. Another browser extension, I'm assuming this is called UBlock Origin and not like microblock, but UBlock Origin is not necessarily, it's kind of like this hybrid ad blocker, tracker blocker, URL sanitizer or verifier. So it's kind of a combination of ad blocker, tracker blocker, and privacy and security extension. And this is recommended by several security folks. And it's pretty impressive. So I just had to find some sites that had a bunch of garbage. And so CNN.com has 50 things that are tracking you, or web bugs, or cookies or whatever. I don't even know what all things are being blocked, but it said that if I went to CNN.com, it blocked 50 items on this page and 6 out of 36 domains. Not sure. I haven't really looked into what this stuff means. And I tried eBay, 12 things blocked. And one additional nice thing is if you click on, say, an ad in a search result, or if you click on some link that is a tracker link, it will warn you. And so in this case, I was clicking on an unsubscribe link in a webmail email that came in one of the webmail services I use. When I clicked on that link to unsubscribe, it knew that it was going to awstrack.me. And I don't know if that's a service. I don't know if that's AWS, but there is an ad and tracking server list, Peter Lowe's ad and tracking server list. So it found that, and it's like, hey, are you sure you want to do this? Now, unfortunately, this is very common in unsubscribe links. So I did choose to proceed because it was a legitimate newsletter that I was unsubscribing to, but it warns you before it lets you proceed. So that's a pretty cool feature. Also on the browser extension privacy front is cookie auto delete. I was looking for an article on a news website. They had a paywall. First time you go to the website, you can view the article. Second time you go to the website, you can't view anything. And you can manually clear your cookies and the cache related to that website manually, but it's kind of tedious. And so I started looking into, is there something that automatically clears this out? And I found cookie auto delete. And it turns out it has a lot of beneficial features. The amount of tracking that is occurring independent of ads or paywalls or anything else is starting to get in the very creepy realm, and it's starting to become a security risk. And apparently Facebook is notorious for this. TikTok has been in the news because it's tracking the physical location of people as well. And I believe Facebook was tracking you across completely unrelated websites through their subsidiary advertising program. So it's getting pretty bad. So this is a great way to automatically clean cookies and cache and other remnants and tracking information left by websites, and it's totally automatic. So if I go to CNN.com and then I close that browser tab, 3 seconds later, it automatically purges all of that stuff. Now, if you're on a website that you want to stay logged into, let's say you're on Gmail and you're logged in and you want to stay logged in and you don't want to have to re-authenticate every time because your cookies got wiped, you can whitelist the Gmail domain or whatever that domain is for Google, and it will permit those cookies to persist. Now, there are still some potential tracking things, so you have to be aware of that, but you can allow cookies you want and everything else gets wiped. So super handy browser extension. And if you're on a paywall and you want to see a second article, you can click on that yellow clean button. It'll wipe everything. You refresh and it's like you're visiting for the first time. So very handy for many different things. Now, And oh, there's an example of how you might whitelist or graylist, and you can do that to the cache, local storage. There are all these actual parameters other than just cookies that websites are using to track. I had never heard of them till I started using this. So in the case of the news website, it was the cache that was somehow being used, I believe. It wasn't a cookie. I cleared the cookies. It still knew who I was. I had to clear these other things using cookie auto delete in order for a fresh interaction with that website. Okay, next up, I wrote a blog post on this. I am starting to use a tool. It's a service actually called Simple Login, and it has this browser extension that allows you to quickly generate random email addresses that are aliases for your main email inbox, whatever address you want to point it to. And this is done for security purposes so that password resets, phishing attempts, attacks on your email inbox are a little bit harder. It's not a hardcore security method, but it is part of operational security or OPSEC that if someone doesn't know my eBay email account, it just makes it a little bit harder for them to try and attack my eBay account. So if they know my email address is steve@aol.com, well, then they just know, oh, maybe steve@aol.com has an account on this bank, on this credit card, on eBay, on PayPal, and they can start attempting to attack those email addresses. And so this is just one more layer to try and make it more difficult. It isn't a security guarantee, but I recently had an issue which apparently many people had. So there's something fishy going on where Evernote sent me a password reset request at 3 a.m. I didn't request a password reset on Evernote. I don't even use an Evernote account anymore. I tried it a while ago. I'm like, well, it kept occurring. And other people are getting this as well. And well, it's because someone just hits reset password and you get that email because it's tied to your email. Well, potentially that can expose the email address. And if someone knows your email address, they just paste that in Evernote and keep trying. Well, the only way I was able to block it was to change the email address on Evernote to an alias. That way someone could guess steve@aol.com, but that's no longer valid for my Evernote account. So now it's Evernote blah, blah, blah at some random domain, and good luck. You can bang away with any email address I have, and it won't be valid for that website. So I'm now using that to replace as many email addresses as I can find for related to website logins, accounts, whatever. So I'm now at, I think, over 60 different aliases, and I'm trying to clean up. I have 14 years of history in my password manager. It is just a nightmare of ancient stuff I haven't used in 10 years. So it's taken a long time to clean up. Another cool thing that I've been doing in the last year is eBay. Like just stuff on eBay. I finally just like, okay, whatever. I'll just buy it. I'll buy used stuff, see what happens. And it's been remarkably excellent. All the stuff on eBay. I think I've only had one or two bad experiences with eBay over the years, and they took care of it right away. And I found some great vendors on eBay. So my kids needed laptops. I had an old one. It's like 6 years old ThinkPad. So one daughter started using that. Well, the other daughter needed a laptop for school. And I realized, why would I pay $1,500 for a MacBook when all they are doing literally is web browsing? 100% of their computer work in school for homework and everything is a web browser. It's Google Classroom, it's web-based tutorials, it's YouTube, their online grades and homework submissions are through a website. They don't need anything else. They use all online apps, typically through Google Sheets or whatever the apps are for Google. So they use Chromebooks in school. So I know some students have these $1,500, $2,000 MacBooks. They're literally just using a web browser. So I thought, well, my ThinkPad X1 Carbon that's 6 or 7 years old works perfectly fine for web browsing. So I got on eBay, $355 for an 8 gig 256 SSD ThinkPad X1 Carbon 5th Gen, which is the exact same one that I owned, still worked perfectly. So I bought that for the second daughter. It was like, awesome. Well, what was very interesting is even though it was sold by a reputable vendor who had tested it, even though it was sold under the eBay refurbished program, which comes with a 1-year warranty, while testing, I just happened to notice that one of the two speakers didn't work. And nice thing about ThinkPads and Dells as well, you can easily take them apart. 5 screws are in. And I tested the speaker and confirmed that one speaker was bad, one speaker worked. And I tried to check the wire, but it was shot for some reason. So went on eBay, $8 to order a replacement pair of stereo speakers for the ThinkPad X1 Carbon. That design hasn't changed in years because the form factor is the same. Shipped from China, free shipping, $8 later. I handed it to my 12-year-old daughter, gave her a screwdriver. She replaced it herself. So my 12-year-old daughter is able to fully service this $355 ThinkPad X1 Carbon. She uses it for school. If she drops it, I don't care. If it's lost or stolen, I don't care. It's like whatever. It's not a $1,500 plus MacBook. And so I was like, well, the kids have one, and I have a newer ThinkPad, but it's this big, heavy P1 beast. And unfortunately, I don't like it because it's so big and bulky and heavy. It's a non-portable laptop as far as I'm concerned. So I said, well, let me splurge for myself and spend a whopping $500 on a Gen 6 with 16 gigs and a 512 gig SSD. Works great. And so I have this. I have dual boot Kali Linux and Windows. I use it all the time. And for all of these laptops, I ordered a D-brand skin. Their latest version of the X1 Carbon skin fits these perfectly fine. You slap a D-brand skin on the lid, looks like a brand new laptop. Looks fantastic. So my cheap eBay laptops, fully serviceable. You can buy almost every single ThinkPad X1 Carbon part online on eBay for cheap. You can disassemble, repair, replace any part, and my daughter could do it easily. And another part I bought was I replaced the battery on mine because it had a high cycle count. The $355 one, brand new battery. It had maybe 30 cycles on it and lasts 8 hours. I also bought the proprietary Ethernet adapter for my Gen 6 just to have it. Could have used a USB one, but I kind of like to have the authentic ThinkPad ones that use their weird port for some reason. So yeah, I'd highly recommend it. And I've subsequently used eBay to purchase ultra small form factor PCs. And I did this because I use several Raspberry Pis. And I don't know if the problem is software or hardware, but I have had some reliability issues with my Raspberry Pis. They will just become unresponsive. I don't know if it's a networking thing, a power thing, a stability thing, the images I'm using, whatever. But generally they work well, but sometimes I'll try to connect and I just can't connect. And I have to pull the power, reboot them, then they work fine for 6 months. So getting a little concerned about reliability. I've replaced the SSDs. So, I don't know what the reason is, but I'm tired enough that I don't want to deal with it anymore. So looking for a new Raspberry Pi in the US, you can only buy the kits as far as I've been able to find. They're like $200+ for a Pi 4. It's kind of preposterous compared to the supposed $65 retail price of a Pi. So I'm looking online and everyone's in the same boat. So people are trying Pi alternatives, and there are all sorts of small, Pi equivalent boards coming out now, but they're not quite as good. They have pros and cons. And so many people are turning to small form factor, ultra small form factor PCs. And so since I've had good luck with the Lenovo ThinkPad laptops, I went with Lenovo ThinkCenter tiny PCs, or ultra tiny or ultra small form factor. They have different names. So I've purchased 3 of these so far. And They're fantastic. They're super generic, super easy. They pop right open. It's just like a little tiny laptop motherboard. You could put in a 2.5-inch solid state drive. Some of them have M.2 slots. And, for my purpose of running a Pi equivalent Ubuntu server or something, they're more than adequate. And based on the benchmarks I've seen, they're vastly faster than a Raspberry Pi, much more capacity. The i5 or i7 processors are so much more powerful than the Pi, and you can have more RAM, more SSD. You're not dealing with just a micro SD for the storage. So I have yet to build one out completely. I have Ubuntu installed on one, but haven't put the software on it to try and replace one of my Pis yet. It's on my to-do list. So $80, that includes a PC with graphics output, with an SSD, with 8 gigs of RAM, with Wi-Fi. I mean, you can get just about anything you want, and $80. And some of them come with power supplies, some don't, but the power supply is like $8 for third-party versions. There are also Dell versions of these that are very popular, the Dell Optiplex, several different model numbers. If you just check YouTube, all sorts of suggestions. And one of the things I wanted to do with one of those small form factor PCs is home automation. So if, in response to my tweet, I got this, there was some people discussing Philips Hue lamps, which are kind of like Wi-Fi controlled. I don't know if Hue requires the hub or the router, the controller, but you can control lights through home automation. So that's kind of a gadget people like. And if you're more into the home assistant side of things and the DIY side of things, I'd recommend checking out Shelly. Shelly is a company that makes these controllers, that little yellow plastic thing. That is a controller, and I think it's like an ESP32 or whatever the number is, a little tiny controller board. You can buy those, but you have to program them. You have to do pinouts, you have to do soldering, and they're not quite commercial grade. Shelly has taken that same microcontroller, put it in essentially a commercial grade package with the pins and screw terminals, great software, mobile app, cloud control if you want it. Really, really refined version of those ESP controller boards. So I was testing it here with LED strip lights. So if you're looking into home automation, check out the controllers at shelly.cloud. They have all sorts of ways to control devices and lights and switches. And so it's an alternative if you're more into the, running wires yourself and DIY stuff instead of Philips Hue. I regularly have to share downloads and software files and updates with hundreds of customers that I support. And I'm encountering an increasing number of companies that are blocking all public file sharing services. OneDrive, Box.com, Download, whatever they're called, right? So Dropbox, anything that you can do to file share, SugarSync, you name it, they're all blocked by more and more of my customers. So I looked into self-hosted file sharing services. I found a few, but one of the ones that I found that I work with someone, a contractor who does a Linux admin work for me. He had used Nextcloud and recommended it. So that's what I went with after trying a few. And so this just installs through a Softaculous installer script, one click on most hosting platforms. Your basic $8, $10 a month web hosting packages. You can go into Softaculous in your cPanel, click Nextcloud, it auto installs and configures, and it is a file sharing service like a OneDrive, self-hosted OneDrive type of thing. You can sync photos to it. You can have email, address books, kind of like a small office internal application. Now, I wouldn't use it for all of those things, but for simple file sharing, public file sharing where I don't care about security, it's perfectly fine. It's worked for most customers. There's still a few that I have that it's blocked, but it has gotten past most of the restrictions at most of my customers. So it's an option to consider. And it has a ton of apps. If you're familiar with Synology NAS, storage units, it's very similar. You can just install a bunch of apps, has a bunch of features. You can turn things on and off. So really neat open source free software alternative to cloud file sharing. And last but not least, in the news lately, you may have seen some news about password managers. And this is just a last minute addition because of the additional disclosure of a breach that occurred at LastPass in October. They're only announcing it now, December 22nd. And they had a breach where they realized that the password vaults, the LastPass customer password vaults, were exposed. They believe were exposed and were stolen as part of that breach of their source code back in August. And on the one hand, it's like, okay, they're encrypted vaults. Like in theory, they should be hack resistant or crack resistant. But one thing I learned as part of this and reading articles about it is that LastPass in 2016 changed their vault design to not encrypt all values, one of which is the URL that you save that is associated with your username and password. The username and password values are encrypted, but the URL is not. And this seemed kind of strange to me. There's an article explaining how this was discovered, and a collective shrug from LastPass, apparently. And I was wondering, why did they do that? Now, ostensibly, it was to display a logo of the website, which seems like a really strange thing for a password manager service to really care about. Well, I'm speculating, but LastPass was acquired in 2015, I believe, by LogMeIn. And it was part of a venture-backed acquisition to consolidate these services. And coincidentally, a year after they were acquired by that venture-backed consortium, they decided to restructure the vault to expose these values and make them non-encrypted. That allows LastPass to see all of the URLs of their 30 plus million customers. Well, if one were to consider the financial motives of a venture-backed firm, it might be valuable to offer or to have information about all of the websites that your 30 plus million customers visit, correlations between different websites, shopping patterns, who knows? And whether that information is anonymized and offered as statistics or sold to a data broker, that might serve as a financial motivation that potentially could explain why that was done. I'm kind of baffled why that would have been done otherwise, unless there was a profit motive. But the issue is now. So even assuming your vault is safe, I kind of have decided that I will not be adopting. I considered LastPass as an option for a business password manager for my team. I am now not too keen on that as an option. Now, regardless, this has been a wake-up call. It's like, okay, do I know exactly how my password manager is handling my saved entries? I don't. I tried LastPass. I didn't know it didn't encrypt the URLs. Now, do I know exactly what these other ones do? No, I just looked at their website. If you ask LastPass, they say they use zero knowledge and everything's encrypted in a vault. They will not disclose or acknowledge publicly on their website, like they won't tell you that your URLs are not encrypted. So how exactly is the data that is stored in any other password manager handled? And are there any things that kind of weaken the information security around those password managers? So I've recently heard about 1Password. Troy Hunt is apparently on the board of 1Password. So he's very clear about that association, but he promotes 1Password. He uses it. He tweeted a discount code that I retweeted recently. So they're offering that, and I'm sure many customers are jumping ship. Bitwarden, I recently saw Tom Lawrence did a video discussing, he switched from LastPass to Bitwarden because of this issue years ago, 2016, 2017. So he saw that, became concerned, and transitioned over to Bitwarden. Bitwarden, I believe, is open source technically, but you can pay for their service where you get the compiled app, you get the syncing services, the family plan, support, and all the other things. So technically they have been audited, they are open source, and 1Password apparently has paid for a code review and audit, which apparently is quite expensive. And so to what extent have you really, really investigated the audit, the review, the security practices and everything, right? It's beyond the scope of what I could possibly do other than reading for articles like this. So I am looking at alternatives. I don't use LastPass, but even the one I use, should I consider switching? If I can't find adequate information about what they do, then how can I assume that it is safe? So it's really hard to know. It's like proving a negative. So should I switch to 1Password or Bitwarden? I don't know. I need to look into that. I have over 2,000 entries in my password manager, so it is not a trivial exercise. I have hundreds of 10-year-old logins that are an absolute mess that I need to clean up, delete, change email, change password. So it's a massive time-consuming undertaking for me to clean that up. But if I'm going through all that effort, is it any more work for me to migrate to a different application? I don't know. But if I do migrate, I'll want to have a little more comfort as to what I'm getting into. It won't be the feature list on the website or some useless article that compares Dashlane to LastPass. Those are so superficial as to be meaningless in terms of security. It's like, oh, what's the price of the family plan versus the team plan? I don't care. They're all so inexpensive as to be irrelevant in terms of price. I now care, are they encrypting everything I have in there? Like everything. And if it is compromised, what is the encryption method being used? And what do I do? Do I need to reset my password? Things like that. So it's a different set of concerns unrelated to the feature list. So with that, I will conclude with a palate cleanser. And this is what I look at first thing every morning when I turn on my computer and my browser pops up. This is a saved tab on my browser, and it pops up the Reddit subreddit called AWW, AWW. So this subreddit is photos of animals and people and pets and birds and snakes and raccoons, you name it. And so this is a recommendation. Put this in your saved browser tabs, have it open every morning. And it's kind of hard to not start your morning off right when this is what you see. So here we have Naughty Cat of the Week, Pork Chop, the newest kitty behavior bootcamp member who just wants to watch the world burn. So really funny, really entertaining, and cute photos of animals. So with that, I hope that was interesting, informative, helpful, and happy holidays. Have a good one, and I'll see you in January.